You're listening to Deliberate Living, a podcast that inspires, empowers, and encourages listeners to live life more authentically. My name is Holly Priestley, and I'm a full-time nomad and writer who has been living in my 1997 Ford van since January 1st of 2019. I travel the United States with my dog, learning how to live with more authenticity. I explore different ways people choose to ditch the prescribed life we've all been sold and live on their terms, finding freedom and happiness however they choose. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deliberate Living Podcast. I'm your host, Holly Priestley, and this week we have Logan Foll on as a guest again. He was one of my very early guests way back at the beginning of this podcast, maybe episode like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Even. But we have him on again today because today's topic is incredibly important and I have mixed feelings about it. And so I wanted somebody on the show who has a little bit more knowledge and experience and expertise to talk about it as well. This week we are talking about the ethics and safety of geotagging. And geotagging is definitely one of those polarizing concepts. In general, if you don't know what it is, geotagging is basically when you call out exactly where you are in a given photo or video. You tell the audience the name and or the location of where you are, and then they in turn can go find those same views, trails, ruins, abandoned towns, petroglyphs, crystals, beaches, wildlife, artifacts, summits, whatever it is that you're tagging. They can then go find those things and have those experiences themselves. So on the surface, geotagging doesn't seem so bad. It's just sharing where you've been, and it's very exciting to share what you've seen and the places you've explored. So what could be wrong with it? Except that it's one of the most polarizing issues in the outdoor world. So I've always struggled with it personally. On the one hand, I don't want to be selfish and snooty by keeping locations to myself. But on the other hand, part of the reason I love these places is the fact that they are largely unknown and they're not crowded or overvisited or anything like that. So I still don't really know the right way to handle like tagging the places that I've been. So I wanted to open up a dialogue about it. And this is the first of what could be many episodes about geotagging in general. So that I could share my thoughts on it, and Logan can also share his thoughts. He is a professional photographer, urbex explorer, firefighter, adventurer. He spends a lot of time in the outdoors and in places that other people don't necessarily get to see, and his opinions are very valuable to me. So, hello, Logan.
Hello.
How do you feel about geotagging in general?
Well,
as an overview, we're going to go deep later.
But as an overview, I fall in the camp that I'm not as crazy about geotagging. I've seen, firsthand so my background is that I come from the Midwest. I grew up in the cornfields of Illinois. And there wasn't, there's not a ton of things to do down there. We do have some national forests and some state parks. Indiana is a playground for state parks. They've got a lot of really awesome ones. And so we grew up, I don't even know if we really went to the national forest much, but we visited a lot of state parks. And so when I came west in 2017, I was treading in waters that I'd really never explored before. Like, we'd gone snowboarding. But that's, out west here, but that was about it. And so, in terms of general speaking, I am not a huge fan on geotags because it makes it almost too easy for people to show up to a place and show no respect to the place, the history, all that kind of stuff. And for me, I've seen places, like Horseshoe Bend, for example, is a big one, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, as the episode goes on. But when I first saw Horseshoe Bend, it was a tiny little parking lot, and you walked up, and there were still people, around, and people were hanging out on the cliffs and taking pictures and stuff like that. And I recently drove by it, and I was kind of shocked, because now, it's in the Glen Canyon National Recreation Area, so it's managed by the Park Service. But now it's got, a parking lot with like 400 plus spaces and a giant fee collection. They're going to construct a visitor center and all these kind of crazy things. And I was like, wow, that is crazy. But we've seen Horseshoe Bend everywhere.
Yeah, that's because of social media. Like, Horseshoe Bend is a perfect example of what geotagging can do to a place. I mean, it's an incredible place, to be sure. If you've ever seen a picture of it or seen it yourself, like, it's a really cool feature in the landscape where the river comes around and turns back on itself and it makes this deep canyon. It's very cool.
Yeah.
But social media got a hold of it and it blew up. People started seeing it and thinking it was cool and wanting to go there. And now the place has changed completely from a few years ago when you saw it the first time.
And there's countless examples of places that have been quote unquote ruined by social media and by geotags and by people, being a little careless with it. I think personally, geotagging is a great way to see, a new place, but at the same time, it draws everyone. It draws the ones who are responsible, and it draws the ones who are irresponsible, whether that's intentional or completely accidental. And so I think the conversation at large is, how do we draw the people who are going to be responsible while also allowing those who aren't the education and the ability to know how to do so. Making it accessible while also making it, an informed experience.
Right. I fully agree. Like I said before, I have mixed feelings about geotagging as a whole. On the one hand, I don't like seeing special places get blown up by social media and or potentially ruined, like we talked about Horseshoe Bend. And on the other hand, I do like encouraging and empowering others to explore their outdoors and see more beautiful things and have those experiences. And so I feel like geotagging is a balancing act. There's not, you can't 100% geotag and you can't 100% not geotag for those reasons. Do you think that by not geotagging, we're excluding others in the outdoor space? Are we being elitist and snooty by not geotagging?
Well, I mean, I don't want to sound like every other white male, but I feel like we aren't. I've done reading across, a bunch of different spectrums, and I think that if you have the ability to click on a geotag, you have the ability to do a Google search, where you have the ability to, look at a photo and be like, wow, I wonder where that might be, and maybe read the caption. Because a lot of times, in my personal experience, people who are putting up, pictures, they'll either be in the hashtags below, or they might say, wow, what a great day at blank. So even if it's not in the geotag, it's circumventing the geotag craze while also not gatekeeping the place itself.
Okay.
And most people don't read the well, I can't say most. I gotta avoid those words. But in my experience, a lot of people, they don't read the captions. So
you don't read captions is what we're hearing.
I read captions occasionally. I don't know. It depends. It depends on the photo and the place and the person and all that. But oftentimes I've noticed that people don't read geotags and they don't read signs.
Okay.
Having worked in public land management spaces, it's one of those things where, they see a geotag and they will stop at nothing to get that photograph. And they'll trample flowers like the super bloom that happened in California. I experienced that firsthand and saw all the social trails through the flower beds and create new trails and put themselves in danger, put others in danger. I think
we're going to talk about the safety of geotagging a little bit later.
All right, we'll go into the safety part later, but yeah. I've got thoughts on that too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we both do.
Yeah, sweet.
So for me personally, I hate seeing the geotags that specifically call out, keep the West wild, keep America beautiful, or, those rub me the wrong way, personally. And that's, my own individual opinion. I feel like it is gatekeeping to go to the effort to specifically tag a not tag. And I feel like by geotagging keep the West wild or something to that effect, you are being exclusionary and elitist. I think that that's just rude. I think if you're not going to geotag, just don't geotag. Just leave it off. Whatever. Don't talk about it. But yeah, I always get rubbed wrong by those ones that are specifically like tagging, like I'm better than you and I'm not going to share where I've been. That being said, though, like I'm a white woman who was raised largely in the outdoors. I know that I have immense privilege of feeling comfortable in these spaces already, and the absolute last thing I would want to do is discourage or prohibit anybody else from finding joy in the wilderness like I do. I don't always tag within the post of a particular photo where it was taken, and I'll like tag like a state like Utah or Colorado or New Mexico or something in the hashtags, but my hashtags won't say exactly where it is either. But if someone DMs me and asks like, hey, where is this? Like, I'm more than happy to share then, right? Like that's the Google search. Like your Google search engine happens to be my inbox.
Yeah.
But I think that's another way around it, and that's kind of how I feel about it. As Logan said, there are a lot of really good resources online for geotagging and exclusionary outdoors behaviors and that sort of thing. I'm going to link to one in the blog post about this from Melanin Base Camp that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, let's go.
So if you want to read a little bit more about that, we're going to share some of those.
Well, can I back up to that or tag responsibly?
Of course, yeah.
Or that keep the West wild.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get a chance to really talk about that one. I think that I see that occasionally. I don't see that very often.
Yeah.
At least in my experience. I have seen things like I spent a summer in the Tetons, and they have started a campaign called Tag Responsibly, Keep Jackson Hole Wild. And I like what they've done there because it's not just keep Jackson Hole wild, keep Jackson Hole white, keep Jackson Hole privileged. Like it's not saying, hey, we're looking for a specific kind of person to be here. Mm-hmm. It's saying tag responsibly. Let's keep these places more like they are right now.
Okay.
So I think that what that's saying is it's kind of combining the whole, tag responsibly, like Leave No Trace. They came out in 2018 with a whole set of social media guidelines, and their first and foremost of those is think before you geotag. So it's just thinking about the responsibility of tagging something appropriately. If it's a place that, can only handle X amount of visitors, we're not trying to keep any certain one group or person out of there. We're trying to keep large numbers of people out of that area. There's only so many visitors certain places can actually handle.
Right.
Like a slot canyon. Or, like even a few days ago, we went to a location here in northern New Mexico that is in volcanic rock. And you can literally see over time that a path has been carved. Sometimes hip high into the rock.
It's a really cool thing to see, but also you can see the impact that each shoe print has on this landscape.
Yeah.
It's a very good direct way to see the impact you're having.
It's very sobering. And while most places aren't that aggressive, the rock is not that soft so that you can see that kind of thing. It's a good thought about, the kind of numbers that we want in these places. Because there are places for everyone.
Oh, there's
no matter
so
where
space.
You are, there is some green or outdoor or wilderness or whatever. Even in bigger cities, there's a ton of parks and open spaces, or, within an hour's drive, you can unlock XYZ locations. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of places that you can go and you can see, and you don't need to blow it up like a Horseshoe Bend or, like a place in Grand Teton,
Well, and on that note, like as far as being exclusionary, places like Horseshoe Bend, when he went a few years ago, it was just a parking lot on the side of the road. Any old person could just drive up and see this amazing view, get their Instagram picture, whatever. And now it's a fee area, And that in and of itself is exclusionary. I don't pay for fee areas personally. Like, that's not in my lifestyle or in my budget, right? So if all of these cool places charge you $10 to go see an overlook, that's exclusionary in and of itself.
Sure.
So having these crowds can really damage the environment, can damage the history that's there. We've been spending a lot of time lately going to see like cliff dwellings and ruins and, you know, Native American type historical places. And, you know, some of them still have a lot of pottery shards or arrowheads or, you know, other neat things in there. And if people go in there and they walk all over it or, you know, even take one piece of pottery with them, like, it's all going to be gone and ruined for everybody else, on top of the fact that, you know, now the parks need to develop more infrastructure and charge fees and all of these things. So it can really snowball.
Yeah, and you know, a place like Horseshoe Bend is lucky in the sense that it's in a national recreation area. It's managed by the parks.
Right.
And they have the resources to build something like that.
Right.
If that were to happen in some remote national forest site, I know just from my own experience, the easiest thing for us to do is throw up a gate.
Yeah, close
and
it down.
That's literally gatekeeping.
Yeah.
So if we blow up a place to the point where it's being overrun with trash and irresponsibility and my personal favorite, surface shitting, people just wiping and dumping right there. Little rock, they think that's sufficient. It's not sufficient.
It's not sufficient.
So it's things like that that shut off access for everybody, or they make it way harder for us to get into a place. Because, for example, let's go with the gate analogy. If they put a gate that blocks off the parking area that makes it, you know, 4 miles further down the road, you now have an 8-mile round-trip hike just to the trailhead. And that's not accessible whatsoever.
Right.
But that is sometimes what we have to do because we don't have...
He says we...
Sorry, I work...
Service
yeah, I work for the
standpoint.
Forest Service in the summers. And
Right.
so because of that, sometimes the gates are an easier option, or, you know, really threatening signs that people don't read, or, you know, things of that nature. More rangers, more things that might tarnish your experience because of other people's decisions and actions. And so, you know, going back and trying to wrap all that, you know, up there, tagging responsibly just means, you know, trying to figure out which sites would be overrun or overused, and you know,
we're
maybe
going to talk about like how to decide where it's okay to tag and where it's not.
Yeah,
also.
and I mean, just tagging with your mind behind it, not just because you've seen that photo, you took the photo, you tagged the photo. Like, it needs to be less mindless. Like, there needs to be some intentionality somewhere in that realm.
Right. It's a sliding scale. Like I said, it's not all geotags all the time or no geotags any of the time. I think that it depends on the place. And, you know, some of what comes down to whether you should tag a place or not is the accessibility, like you were saying, like the danger associated with geotagging and showing something that's really cool and people being like, oh, I really want to do that.
Yeah.
They did it. I can do it. And then people not necessarily firmly grasping what it means to get to that one place. Geotagging can be dangerous. Sure
can be. So should we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
All right, let's talk about that. So, like, dangers with geotagging. Especially in arid environments, of which I have worked in the past couple years. I'll take Sedona, for example. There is an area that you can jump into a pristine creek, but the problem is it's quite a bit of a walk. And so because of that, I think a lot of people... So it's an 8-mile round-trip hike, okay? But I think that people see 4 miles to the place, and they think that's a round trip, and then they think 4 miles, I can easily do that, no problem. And so I was a ranger down in Sedona for a summer, and I saw a lot of that, where people were out there, you know, trying to brave an 8-mile hike with a bottle of Aquafina and flip-flops. And
man.
I mean, I saw people who were sunburned, who were dehydrated, who were about to pass out. And for me, I wasn't even a first responder in that situation.
Right.
I would have been someone who would have alerted the first responders and done my best to help the person. But when you've got a whole horde of people going out there, you're going to have the folks who can handle it, and you're going to have the folks who can barely handle it, and then you're going to have the folks who can't handle it and thought they could. Mm-hmm. And so I think that some of the dangers of geotagging is that there might be a place that's harder to get to than, say, your Horseshoe Bend, where you could park the car and walk up a hill.
Right.
So you just have to think about, when you geotag a place, like, is this hard to get to? Would it be better for me to maybe mention where it is in the caption and describe how hard the hike was, or what you need to be prepared for the hike? Like, not to discourage anyone, but to prepare them, and also to educate them about how to recreate in that location safely and properly.
Yeah.
Because it's also in a wilderness area. You tuck yourself way back in the depths, as it were.
I fully agree. I feel like even on a massive scale, these books out there, like Wild, talking about the PCT, or Into the Wild, talking about Alaska, or any of the other things that Crazy Kid did, they're geotagging on a massive scale. But at the same time, like for Wild, if anybody's read it, it's about this woman who hiked the PCT, the Pacific Crest Trail, with very improper gear, no experience, no training, no nothing, and she was fine. And so the PCT got a lot more attention because the book was widely received, and they made a movie out of it and all these things. But it doesn't, if people read the book or see the movie and they're like, oh, I can do that, I want to do that, and they don't, like Logan said, they have no idea what it actually takes to hike thousands of miles, or even 8 sometimes. And I feel like, you're just putting people in danger, because you're highlighting and showing off something that people aren't prepared for, aren't experienced enough to do, and are unaware, can get them into serious danger. And so even if the only person you're putting in danger is yourself, which is a lie, and in the first place, it's never true. If you get in danger and then you need a first responder to come and save you, rescue you, airlift you out of a place or whatever, they're also putting themselves in danger, right? And that costs the communities a shit ton of money. So being unprepared and going into something without the proper knowledge or experience or information can cost you your life, can cost somebody else their life, can cost the community so much money that could be better spent on other things that actually benefit the local people.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it from a search and rescue kind of perspective, every time someone, let's say, is airlifted out of the Grand Canyon, which I believe there's a fund for that. I believe that there is a fund specifically for helicopter use, and don't quote me on this, but I think that there, is money available for that purpose. But other places...
This is not giving you permission to go need to be airlifted out of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, please don't. But, in some places, you getting flown out, or you getting hiked out on a stretcher with a team of 6 to 10 people, because it takes a lot of people to get one person out of anywhere, especially the wilderness. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, you being responsible and doing some research and asking some folks and being prepared and just being ready for what's going to be coming at you is a huge way to save, a lot of time, money, effort on a search and rescue end as well, and that money can then be used by the place to make it better for the users and to have resources for the users, and, just keeping it good for everybody. So, there is definitely a responsibility element that comes into venturing into any place, and not just blindly walking into a place that's geotagged because you think that if so many people got there, clearly you could do it. That's not really how that works. So even if it's a place that you've seen that's geotagged, you do need to put some some effort into knowing what you're getting yourself into. And I'm all for, a half-assed plan of running into a place because it's fun, it's adventurous, and you don't know what's going to come at you. But, like, you've got to balance that out with being at least minimally prepared.
Maybe slightly more than minimally.
She's more of the prepared type.
Don't do an 8-mile hike with one little bottle of water and some flip-flops.
Yeah, do the bare minimum to make sure that you have what you need to be good for X amount of time, X amount of miles, what have you.
Right. So do you ever think that there's a time when geotagging is okay? How do you personally make that decision, like when to tag and when to leave it out?
So I think for me personally, when I decide to tag a place, I keep it broad, or I keep it to the town that is located near it, so that somebody has an idea where I might be generally, and if they're curious, they can either ask me or do a little research on their own.
So you give, like, the first couple of crumbs, and then they can make their own trail after that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not hard to find anything on the internet. Like,
true.
If you really want to find out, like, who owns a building, you can find their tax address. Like, if you want to find a place to go recreate, it's not that hard. You just type in a place and what you want to do. So it's like, if I want to go to Flagstaff and I want to go mountain biking, Flagstaff, Arizona, mountain biking. Boom! Tons of trails, all kinds of crazy stuff happening. Like, it's really not that hard to find some cool stuff. And so, I think that.
So as far as deciding when and when not to share your own stuff, you want to give people a broad idea, and then they can choose their own mystery. They can choose their own research, or they can reach out to you and figure out where you went.
Yeah, and I mean that's a huge part. That's a huge part of going outdoors. Is I know that with me, I don't want some canned experience just because somebody else took a picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know where that area might be, so that I can go find something similar or find my own adventure.
Right.
I mean, there's so many places that look similar, but they're in the same geological area, and so there's a lot of other cool things around that one. And so, especially with the whole geotagging argument, I think that tagging a place that is underserved but could benefit from having a little extra tourism, I think that's a good time to do it.
Yeah.
And probably places that are, like national parks that are built to have the infrastructure to hold big groups.
Yeah.
I think that one of the big, great things about the national parks is that they introduce so many people to the outdoors.
Yeah, and most national parks, I feel, do a pretty good job of explaining the expectations and the responsibilities, especially if you go in the visitor center or in any of the museums when they open up again after the pandemic. But even at the trailheads, often there are signs and information and explanations about what you can use the trail for, whether dogs can go or not, whether bikes can go or not, where you're supposed to put your trash. And so, yeah, I agree that national parks are very good for, casual hikers or newbie hikers or, people who want to go adventure but maybe don't know how quite yet to on their own. National parks are a really good starting point. And they're beautiful. That's why they're national parks.
They're quite nice. But yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is tagging appropriate locations and moments. You don't want to tag someplace that's way out in the boonies.
Right.
Or if you do, keep it broad or to the town nearby, and they might be able to find it from there. But if they're finding it from there, they're also willing to go the extra step to learn about the place and know what some of the hazards are and what they should do to be prepared. So I think that's the big part of it.
Yeah. For me, when it comes down to deciding whether or not to geotag a location, I balance, like Logan said, like whether the place is so iconic, that everyone probably has already heard of it or seen it anyway, like a lot of national parks. But then a national park tag is actually kind of a really broad tag, right? If you take a picture of the Grand Canyon and you tag Grand Canyon, there are still millions of places within the Grand Canyon that tag could be.
Yeah.
Or Grand Teton, or Yellowstone, or even Petrified Forest, even some of the smaller parks. So if a place is that iconic and has the infrastructure and is big enough, I will definitely tag like the park that it's in or whatever. But also like smaller state parks, local parks that have the infrastructure and could benefit from a little bit of an influx of visitor dollars. I think that is also a good place to tag.
Yeah.
And as Logan said, and as I said earlier, I will often tag like a state as a whole if it's not in like a state park or a national park, or like a part of a state. Southwest Colorado or Southeast Utah or
a forest, a national forest, or maybe a BLM area.
Yeah, and then it's kind of a starting point, like Logan said. And if you're curious about where that overlook, hot spring, waterfall, lake, trail, whatever is, you can go do the research on your own and maybe find something cooler than what I found anyway. Or you can always reach out and I will share as well.
Yeah.
These days, specifically, this month being Native American Heritage Month, I'm also starting to tag my posts within the post of the community, the indigenous community that used to reside in that area. There is no public land.
Or the ones that still do, in certain cases.
Right, in certain cases. There is no public land or private land in America that the white people discovered. There were other people here before we were. And so, we pretty much just took all the best bits and shipped them off to not great areas, not great residences. But as part of Native American Heritage Month, I have been researching and learning more about the cultures and the communities and the peoples within them. And so I am also using that as a tag to bring more awareness and to show some respect to the people who were here before we were.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more about how to do that, nativelands.ca, I think, is the website I use. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but I will link to it. So definitely recommend doing that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think that, if there is one good benefit, we talked a lot about the negatives of geotagging and when to do it, when not to do it. But I think one of the benefits of tagging a place and making it feel more accessible, for better or for worse, is that you gain more voices. Now is more important of a time than ever to stand up for your public lands and to fight for the places that either you've been to or that you've never been to. Like East Coasters, like you're going to come west at some point and you're going to see some really cool stuff, but it won't be here if you don't stand up for it now. And West Coasters, there's some really cool stuff on the East Coast and there's great stuff in your backyard. Even if you live, in a larger city and you haven't been there yet, stand up for the places that you've not seen. Or maybe the few you've seen on Instagram that have been tagged. So, I think that having all of those places and getting people to them, that's the way we're going to have, advocates for the outdoors. I think that, back in 2018, the Outdoor Industry Association did a study about, people using the outdoors and how much money was coming in from, outdoor recreation and all these things. And like 47% of the U.S. population got out in 2018 when they did that survey. And this year, I know for a fact it's way more because we saw a lot more people out, which is great, because it wasn't just every overlook that's on Instagram. It was like everywhere people were out. And
so
I like
pros and
to see
cons to that too.
Yeah.
Right? I like to go into the wilderness to get some space, and there wasn't a lot of space to be had. But on the other hand, the people who are also out there enjoying the public lands are now, at least in some small way, advocates for public lands.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah. We need everybody we can get.
Yeah.
You just got to do it responsibly. That's my only thing.
Just wanted to make sure it was still recording. So, do you have any tips for how someone can find cool places to be if there's no geotags to reference? I've got my methods. What are yours?
Well, let's see here. There's great resources out there for maps. There's free ones, there's paid ones. One of my favorite free ones is caltopo.com. It's in California, C-A-L, topo.com. I'm sure she can link that as well.
Yep.
You can find all kinds of maps. You
It's
can
not
find
specifically for California.
Yeah. It's for everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's called Caltopo per se, but it's got maps for everything. And so you can go and you can click and you find cool places. REI has a whole slew of apps that you can use. They've got Mountain Project for rock climbing. They've got
activity specific.
Yeah, activity specific. But you can find some really cool stuff. Like they've got Hike Project for hiking, Trail Run Project.
They've got one for mountain biking.
I think it's Bike Project is for mountain biking. They have Ski Project, which is for shredding it.
Probably skiing.
shredding the gnar and the pow pow.
Yeah.
Should probably cut that out, but
not going to.
Oh. But I mean they've got a whole slew of resources. I know that, in the past, maybe 2-3 years, companies have really stepped up in a big way to make the outdoors more accessible and to have more resources because, we don't want anybody to feel like they can't use the outdoors or to feel like it's so inaccessible. A lot of us who, for example, grew up in the Midwest where there wasn't a whole lot of stuff and came out here, like we had to learn it the hard way. Ask some friends like questions or, talk to a stranger in the parking lot and be like, hey, what's to see here? Like what's around?
I take my knowledge of how to find good places in the outdoors for granted all the time. I didn't realize that I had a system for like picking and planning a backpack trip until I started taking my friends who had never been backpacking before. And then I realized, after they were asking me a bunch of questions that I just instinctually, which is not true at all, I had learned it growing up, I had learned it previously, and I just didn't realize that it was a lesson. Now I'm able to teach other people. But yeah, like we take this shit for granted, like what we know and what we've experienced. And so ask. I love to share my process for things.
Yeah.
I get very anal retentive about planning. And so if I can share it with somebody, that just makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Google is definitely a good place to start.
Google's great.
A lot of apps, books.
All Trails, they have some good resources.
And a lot of these apps that he's mentioning, All Trails, Mountain Project, Bike Project, all the REI things, a lot of the like camping apps that I've mentioned in previous episodes, a lot of them are crowdsourced. So you're going to see things that people are actually using and get actual firsthand experience, maybe even some photos of them. And so that can really help put you at ease for what you're getting yourself into, which is very nice. And sometimes they include things like, a reviewer was there last week and it was really, really muddy. Bring an extra pair of boots or something. That kind of information is invaluable. Yeah,
that's true. The reviews are nice, especially if you're, maybe you're a little intimidated or you're not really sure where to start with a hike. Yeah. A lot of times you'll get in there and it's like a recipe blog. Like you just want the recipe, but they're going to give you everything that happened that day.
Yeah, all the stories,
so,
way
you'll get
more
in
than
there,
you need.
and maybe for the folks like us, we'll do a little eye roll because we don't need to know the whole story. We just want the recipe. But for the people who are there to devour that content because they don't really know, they're going to read that whole thing. Like, it's going to tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah,
like,
I think
that's
maybe I
valuable research.
I probably undershare.
So go read the reviews and just get curious, stay curious, and just, I think the big thing, is not to use the geotag as a crutch. It's to use it as an inspirational, starting point. And then it can be as big of an adventure as you want from there.
Yeah. Fully agree.
What do you use?
Agree. It kind of depends on where I'm going and what I'm doing. So if I'm going to a brand new place that I've never been before, I have a big funnel system where the top of the funnel, the very beginning of the search project process is everything. I want to know everything about Tucson, Arizona. I want to know everything about it. I want to know all of it. So I'll just Google like Tucson, Arizona hiking or activities near Tucson or camping near Tucson or something like that. And I'll read everything that I find. And then the more I learn and have like a baseline understanding, then I'll narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down more and more and more to figure out where I want to go and what I want to see. But a lot of that, my ability to narrow it down comes with the fact that I've been doing this my whole life and I know what I like. I know what I want to do. I know the trails that will appeal to me. Also, you know, the longer I'm in my van, the more I know what my van can and cannot handle, what roads we should and shouldn't drive on. I've got my dog, so I need to make sure that whatever I'm doing is dog friendly or that the weather is good enough to leave her in the van for an hour. And so your filtering systems will just depend on your lifestyle, your ability, your knowledge. But if you're just getting into the outdoors and you're just learning how to go hiking and all of that, like, be open to everything. Do all of it. Start small. You know, maybe if you've never hiked before, don't do a 10-mile, 14er or anything like that. But start small and open yourself up to everything. And then after you've done whatever activity it is you want to do, gone to see the overlook, done the hike, gone to the waterfall, gone to the hot spring, whatever it is, like, reassess, like, did I enjoy that? What would be better next time? And it's just through those experiences you'll be able to learn more about yourself and what turns you on and makes you happy.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to say about geotagging this episode?
Sure. The other Leave No Trace, social media guidelines that they dropped. One of them is be mindful of what your image portrays. I think that's a really helpful tidbit. You don't want to take a photo that is misleading in a way that it demonstrates someone doing something that is harmful to the locale, such as the super bloom, like people dancing around the flowers. Sure, if it's one person and they're dancing around the flower bed, like, that may be
still not a good idea.
Super destructive, but you get a lot of folks cycling through that, and you're going to have a runway. And even if someone has taken a picture where there is a pathway through, but then they've hid the pathway in a certain way so it looks like people are just dancing through the flowers, people are going to try to recreate that shot. So I think it's wise to, and this leads into the next principle. I wrote these down so I wouldn't forget. Encourage and inspire, leave no trace in your posts. So I think that
we could do more of that.
Use your voice and use your influence and, use whatever you got going on with your social media to inspire people to stop, look at that picture, and read on in your caption to see what you have to say. And when you have something to say something that inspires other people to be responsible and to use the outdoors in a way that it preserves it so that all of us can use it throughout the years. You don't want to do something that's going to cause irreparable damage. And that leads me to my next point, which is the last one, which is shaming is not the answer.
No.
And this is huge because I've seen a lot of people bully the hell out of other folks on the Instagrams and other social medias. But Instagram is where I spend a lot of my time, and I've noticed a lot of it there. So make sure that when you see something that you don't think is necessarily right, please just reach out to them privately and not maliciously. Like, don't discourage someone from doing what they were doing if they don't know what they were doing. Like, some people, they know better. Still shouldn't shame them. But, you should reach out to the ones that you think might,
Don't be a bully.
Don't be a bully.
Don't be a bully. Like,
Yeah.
I respect Logan. If he did something that I didn't agree with, I wouldn't blast him on social media and, show a bunch of other people that he's a terrible person and get everyone to gang up on him.
Yeah.
I would just respectfully be like, hey, dude, what you doing there? And we'd have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Bullying and shaming is never the answer. Educating, reaching out. Maybe you misunderstood something. Maybe they're not even doing anything wrong. It just came across weird on social media, like things do, because there's, the faceless, toneless other, and we just don't know what other people are going through. So,
yeah.
Don't be an ass.
Yeah. So, just keep an eye on things, and do your best to use your voice to, inspire others to do good things. Or if you're not sure what you're looking for or how to get outside or how to do whatever, hit those of us who are. Hit us up. Like,
whether they're total strangers, like if you don't know Logan or I, we are giving you full permission to ask us questions about how we go outside and adventure. Or the chances are there's somebody who's already in your life who does the things that you think are cool because you're following them on social media. They posted a thing that you liked. You can reach out to them too. People love sharing what they know.
Yeah.
In the same vein, if you reach out to somebody who's an ass and is like, I'm not going to tell you, you got to find it on your own. Like, maybe don't be friends with them.
Yeah, that could be a thing.
Just a helpful tip from me to you.
Yeah. Yeah, but also don't, I feel like there's so many people who just ask, where is this? On any post, no matter what. And if I said where it was in the caption, and you're asking, where is this? I am going to leave you unread. Because if you are unwilling to even read the few words that I put in below the photo...
My captions can be pretty long. His are not.
Mine aren't. They're usually punny. But if I put where I was at in the caption, and you didn't take the time to read the caption, and you're asking where it is, I know that you are not going to go outside and do the right thing. That's just a blanket statement, but it's probably going to be true.
As with everything else, there's a lot of nuance that goes into geotagging, social media, finding places to adventure, etc., etc. So be mindful, tag when appropriate, always be respectful of the people around you and the history of the place that you've been, and the people who are coming after you based on your post that you made.
Mm-hmm.
And tag responsibly, don't be an elitist asshole.
And go have fun.
Have fun.
It's a good time out there.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Deliberate Living. If you have any questions about geotagging, or if you have a comment, I would love to have this be an ongoing dialogue, because I do think it's really important. It's really polarizing. And like I said, there's a lot of nuance to it. So feel free to reach out and let me know what other questions you have, and we can address those in future episodes. If you got value out of this episode, please go ahead, like it, give it 5 stars, whatever it is on the platform that you're digesting it on. Share it with somebody you think could really benefit from it. And if you want to help offset some of the costs that go into producing this podcast, I have a Venmo and a PayPal linked in the description as well. But tune in next week and enjoy the rest of your day. Go adventure. Have some fun. Bye.
We've reached the end of this episode of Deliberate Living. You can find the show notes and everything we referenced over on my website, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, on YouTube, or sign up for email updates every time something new is published. I'll see you next time on Deliberate Living, and until then, keep your life on the DL too.